Well, welcome to another episode of the Grazing Sheep Podcast. I'm your host, Big Tom Perkins, along with Dr. Cameron Meyerly. And on our last episode, I had mentioned that I had quite a few questions and I was kind of behind in my getting them answered. And just life came up, and I still don't have any of those answered. So we thought we'd answer a few of them here today and see what all we could get into. So I had a question from a guy. It said in the spring of 2023, we planted 32 acres of a pasture mix. There was some fescue, orchard grass, and red clover. The farmer that he hired seeded the red clover far too heavy and ran out of red clover about halfway through the acreage. So that pasture now is just dominated by that red clover.
The
And the
one end.
grasses did real great on the other side. He made some hay off it. I think a first cutting and a second cutting, and he went down and made a little bit of third cutting, and or was going to make some third cutting, but he ran into drought, got too dry, and so there wasn't enough there. So they decided they were going to graze it. But in the meantime, where they had all the red clover, he's pretty sure that went to seed. And so now he has even more red clover there.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a fun
Uh,
one. And I can speak from some personal experience. We were overseeding or actually reseeding a pasture environment there in Morgantown and went through with a broadcast spreader back of the tractor, like a big one, which was a treat for me because I wasn't usually was out there with the spinning
yeah.
uh, hand seeder walking
Oh
every
yeah.
15 feet. But what happened was this field was not perfectly smooth. And it's West Virginia, so you don't have necessarily flat ground that you're planting onto. Um, and what we realized after about the second pass, going back and forth, the opening of the door, that bolt or whatever mechanism that they used to hold that open, had bounced its way all the way open.
Oh
And
boy.
so the situation of taking now that was only like 6 acres worth of seed, but um, still a lot of clover at the top side of that field and very little by the time we got to the bottom. Because we didn't get to the bottom, we ran out of clover seed. So
Yeah.
this is something like you're not alone. This has happened. I don't want to say to everybody, but I'd say to quite a few people. And the interesting thing, you mentioned making hay on there and it reseeding itself. And I think red clover does a really nice job of reseeding itself.
Yep.
If you would have been able to get that third cutting off without it going to seed, you do have a life cycle that maybe limits some reseeding some long term establishment because it's a biannual, meaning
Yeah.
it'll exist for 2 years. If you can keep that seed from taking off or it repopulating itself, uh, you tend to be safe. You can at least reduce your population. But yeah, do you have any suggestion on how do you manage that in a grazing environment?
Well, I like red clover, so I've
Yeah.
yet to be in a situation where I had too much. I did have a field that was in corn one year, and the next year they were putting a gas line through that field, so there was nothing planted in it. And so I just brush hogged it off when they were all done because it was just kind of a mess. And that third year, it just blossomed with volunteer red clover. There were like no grasses in there at all. I mean, I'm sure there were some, but it was just all red clover. And I grazed sheep on that. Um, Now, part of that was when I moved sheep onto there, I let them graze. I grazed them in some just pretty much straight grass. Then I put them on that clover and for about maybe like 6 hours, and then I pulled them off and put them back on some grass again. And I did this for a couple of days to just kind of buffer their rumen. So I didn't have to worry about too much bloat with that. I did put out the sodium bicarbonate as well because I was worried about bloat. But after, I don't know, 3 or 4 days, those sheep just ate and ate and ate and ate and ate. And I didn't have any kind of trouble with them at all. But like you said, after a couple of years of grazing that pretty heavy, all of a sudden that clover just kind of got in check. It wasn't
Right.
a big issue. And I
Yeah,
know
and the idea of
he said too in his email that the ground is really rocky, so they didn't want to plow it. And I know exactly what you're talking about because I like the plow. I call it recreational plowing because it's just kind of fun to do. But on the ground here that's been strip mined, that just means you're going to pick up just wagon loads of rocks.
mm.
I tell everybody that our farm used to be on a hill and we picked all the rocks and now we're in a valley.
Right.
So it's kind of amazing. So yeah, I would definitely not plow it. And he also says that he can't spray because he's got some vineyards around the outside of that pasture. And it kind of sounded like
Yeah.
they weren't his either. So double,
Okay.
he definitely don't want
Yeah,
to be spraying with
and
that.
that could be an option to control just some of those setbacks, some of those legumes, some of those broadleaf plants.
Yeah, so
But
he can't. He just doesn't have that option to spray. But honestly, like you said, if you can manage your grazing over the next 2 years, there's not going to be much clover there.
right. And I
You're
wouldn't
going to get
say
rid of a
like
lot
there
of that
is a
clover.
risk. Yeah, there's always that risk of bloat, but I do think we freak out about it. You know, when we think legumes, specifically the clover,
Yeah,
we tend to freak out about it pretty quickly and like, oh, can't we can't consume this, or the sheep can't consume this, and then it ends up being a hindrance. I think, taking precautions, like you mentioned, Tom, getting them loaded up on dry forage to begin with, and then looking at having that sodium bicarb out there, having access to that to minimize our bloat risk is huge.
yeah,
Start with that, manage the animal how you normally um, would in that environment, and then you're not going to run into an issue of any type of significance.
yeah. Now I wonder too, if they're grazing that clover, can they actually? Do you think they could pass any seeds through their rumen?
Yeah, that's a good question. I
So
know.
the only reason I brought
Um,
that up is because he says half that pasture is doesn't have any clover in it or very little, and the other half is quite a bit. And I wonder if he could graze that in such a way that today you could graze the clover side, tomorrow you could graze the grass side, and keep moving back and forth like that. And I wonder if there's any possibility that maybe you could spread some of that seed to the other side.
yeah, that's a great question. We would need to look at the data that's out there because I know there have been some people that have actually included clover seed into their mineral to
Yeah,
try to overseed some of those plants. And there is some breakdown of that seed. So by the time you factor in the cost of the clover versus just going out and broadcasting that seed, it doesn't make sense to put it in the mineral. I know when we were feeding, we've made quite a bit of hay that has clover that's headed out just from a poor time management, poor
yeah,
poor hay cutting management situation. And early on, a lot of times I would think that, when we would haul manure out from those sheep that we were feeding that clover hay that had that seed incorporated into the hay, you would kind of think like, oh, we're kind of overseeding with clover with this manure pack, and the thought being it was coming through the sheep. Well, when you stop and think about how we were feeding hay and where that clover seed was ending up, we were
yeah,
probably having greater success, and there'd be no way to track this, but greater success from seed that was being wasted. Every time I move that bale, I'm losing that seed.
yeah,
Um, and so just eating behavior in the barn, out of that hay feeder, we were ending up with clover seed in our bed pack and then spreading it out. It was a wonderful way to overseed clover where we didn't have to go out and buy clover seed. But after you stop and evaluate it, I'm of the opinion that was coming from the bed pack of seed that was falling out, that was waste, the waste portion of the hay, versus the stuff that was coming through the animal. Um,
Yeah,
but there is some data out there, and we can dig into that and maybe report back later.
yeah, I don't think it's a very I think you'd be further ahead to go out and spread the seed as opposed to trying to feed it and take it out. But I do know more than once I did see cow patties with clover coming up out of them, and I
Yeah, and
often
if I
wondered,
remember
yeah, how
correctly,
did that occur? Did that come from the seed that was in some hay, or something they had eaten, or did just did birds just drop it there? Who knows? But did
yeah, and I
something?
need to go back and look. My understanding is some of that seed will pass through.
Yeah,
By the time you feed it, the portion like wasting a
yep,
significant portion of it because some when that seed breaks down on the inside, I might as well just go out and spread it. So, it we can report back on that part of it specifically, but I think from a management standpoint, I mean, starting with the sodium bicarb and then just not worrying about it. Going out and managing that clover, how it needs to be managed with the animal health in mind
yeah.
is going to be your best friend there. But I wouldn't worry too much
Well, I've been told over
on.
and over and over again, in your pastures, you get what you graze for. So if you would graze that clover hard and really keep an eye on that and get in there and keep hitting that before it goes to seed, you will graze it out if that's what you want to do. I think that would definitely be the way to approach that. So we got another question from Betty. Um, it's her first year raising Katahdins. Yeah, it's Katahdin sheep. She's had some help with NRCS. She's got lots of water lines in and some interior fencing and all that. But she was saying that she uses a spreadsheet to help her calculate capacity, and she can expand the fields and so on with netting. And she's wondering what we use to track data on our flocks or what we would recommend. So she wanted to know if we created an Excel spreadsheet, and I kind of chuckled when I saw that because I'm thinking maybe he has not been listening real careful because Cam
Tom loves Excel.
Cam can do anything on Excel, and I can't do the simplest things on Excel.
You can open it up
I
most
can
days.
open it up. That's about it. I have tried to input data, and I'll get about halfway through and realize I have my columns all screwed up, and it's a mess. So I have completely given up on Excel. Um, I bought a book called Excel for Dummies and lost it on the way home. That's how bad I am in Excel.
Great.
No, but I use for flock management, I really just I use my laptop, I guess, and I print off literal sheets of information that I type in and have those all kind of sitting in a binder, and I keep pulling them out and looking at them and crossing things out, adding things to them because I am horrible at Excel. Also in NSIP, so that I forget what that program's called that we use,
Pedigree master.
Pedigree Master. So everybody hates Pedigree Master because it's clunky, but I use it quite a bit. I go back through and look because there'll be times I'll be thinking, "Did that ewe ever lamb?" And I'll be like, "Oh, that would be in Pedigree Master." So I look in Pedigree Master, and I can tell from there. And then as far as pastures, I use Pasture Map. It and I use it more for keeping track of my rest days than anything else. But it has all my moves in there, how long I was in each pasture and that kind of thing. But the biggest thing I use it for is keeping track of my rest days. And by looking at my rest days, I can tell where I've been and where I haven't been yet. So what do you use
Yeah,
for your pastures? Are you
yeah.
using
So I've got a notebook. We've got our pastures labeled. The hard thing is like it's very, very crude, very rudimentary in terms of like technology and what I would consider accurate data. And I think one of my biggest problems has been, and I think it's a pasture, sheep, cattle, whatever mentality is we are so ingrained to focus on the animal production management side of it that like I don't mind collecting data for birth weights, weaning weights, everything else, and I think it's super important. And will tell you that I think some data collection doesn't have to be that in depth on your own flock of sheep, your own herd of cows is absolutely critical. However, we're not taught, and it's not stressed to the extent that it is on the livestock side to collect the data on our pasture and production attributes of our forage acres.
yeah.
Um, yeah, and here's a prime example. We planted a hayfield a number of years ago, and when we were talking with FSA, they had asked like, "Hey, what are your production metrics?" We wanted to put a barn up using some hay storage, install that using some FSA funds, and when we went to the office and talked to them what we were producing on the acreage that we had, they're like, well, that's not average for the area. And I said, I know it's not average, but I can tell you we've kept a log of bales. We have an average weight of what these bales are,
Yeah.
and we're cranking out 3 ton to the acre versus your 1.82 average that you say can be done in this area. We have different soil than what the average is, and you've got people that are doing a really good job and then people that are doing a very poor job
Yeah.
at capturing the stored forages. So that all being said, we need to get better. I've got a notebook that pastures are labeled and given a name, and um, just a crude jotting down of we went in when we had 12 inches of forage, and we left when there were 4.
Yeah.
Estimate what our dry matter per acre inch is on there using that grazing stick, and what did we consume, and then that's how we're setting up a lot of our allotments anyway. But trying to track, okay, well, we grazed that 3 times, that field 3 times this year. We removed 40 inches total of vegetation, and that gives us an idea on what our production yields were from the grass. And so really that's what I'm more after. What quantities are we growing? And like this year, I might as well throw the book in the trash. I'm sure people are just sick and
Yeah.
tired of Tom and I talking about how dry it is. But I just as a reminder, so people can have some sympathy, we're grazing residue. I'm going to call it residue because I hate to call it like regrowth or stockpile.
Yeah.
Because there's 8 inches from June.
Yeah.
Got 8 inches of growth that we're going to strip off from the month of June to December. Um, anyway, that's again Cameron's sob story, but the it, the way that we're looking at it is I would like to track production of forage on a per acre basis to give me an idea on what I can raise sheep wise. So if I know I can produce 2 ton to the acre of dry on a dry matter basis, 2 ton to the acre annually, if I've got 10 acres, then I know I've got 4,000 pounds times 10. We're looking at 40,000 pounds of dry matter that I can graze for 9 months out of the year.
Yeah.
And so I would like to, we had an opportunity to meet the pasture map people at the Grazing Lands Conference, and Would really like to get involved with that because one of the areas that I would like to track some things are on those rest periods, like Tom was talking. Um, so I could, it tells a better story on what we're doing. And I've been pretty open on this platform of saying, if that grass is ready in 35 days, we're going to go back and graze it
Yeah.
because we're selecting for animals that um, are not getting parasitized in the environment. Um, and it's our way to manage our disease issues, being internal parasites, and maximize the quality of forage going into what those animals are. And so, not saying that's what we're going to pursue in the future, but up until this point, that's really what we've been pushing for is quality forage going in, and how much of it can we grow per acre.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. It's funny because cousin Richie Perkins, we actually don't know if we're related or not. We've not gone down that rabbit hole yet to find out
Oh, that's funny.
if we are. But he would like to know what's the max days you can do between grazing rotations. And
Max days?
I guess the max would be 365.
No, there's no number. It could be 1,000. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, if I've got 1,000 acres and 10 sheep,
Yeah.
it might be. I'm not saying that's a smart economic decision there,
No.
but it might be 10 years.
Yeah.
Come back, we'll take off all the saplings, and then we'll see you again in 10 years. But
Yeah.
like I know that's not what he's asking.
No, I
But in
gotta
terms
say,
of maximums, I can wait as long as I want.
yeah. The I think what he's asking is how long can you leave sheep on one pasture? Because I know
Oh,
uh,
gotcha. Well,
I
that's very
have,
different.
yeah. So I have this issue where I have it. It's ingrained in my head that you got to move sheep every day. And so when I go to somebody's place and I'm trying to help them set things up,
Yeah, Tom starts with that.
and I start with that. Yeah, that you got to move sheep every day. And I forget that people have lives because I don't have a life. And I've got
Moving
this.
sheep every day. That's
Yeah,
Tom's life.
that's what my life is, moving sheep every day. I forget that other people have kids. I had kids, but I sold mine to the circus years ago because they were goofy looking, and and the market was there. So they're half Sasquatch. So it's just the market was there, so I
High
sold.
demand.
High demand, so I sold them. But I'm still a firm believer that the more often you can move your sheep, the better it is for your sheep and the better it is for your grass, the better it is for your grass recovery and all that. But we know from a grass point of view, Jim Garish has done a whole bunch of research on this. If you leave cows in for one day, you can get 100% utilization of that grass. If you leave cows in for 2 days, you get something like uh, 65% utilization of that grass because a bunch more is going to get tramped down, a bunch more is going to get soiled. If you go to like 3 days, this is all with cows, and I would assume it'd be pretty close to the same with sheep. You're suddenly down to like 25% utilization. Those numbers are not exact what he said. But the longer you leave them in there, the more of that grass gets soiled, tramped on, and they're not going to eat it. And
Yeah.
so,
So Tom's old adage, and we probably need to have it made into a t-shirt, is on day one, they're grazing in the kitchen. In
yep,
day two, they're grazing in the living room. And by day three, they're grazing in the bathroom.
right.
And though I love it, and again, I think it's t-shirt material. And if somebody else does it before we do, we want, royalties. But
Right.
the I remember the first time Tom told me that, and I think I pretty frankly said back to him, like, well, they're animals, and if I want them to graze in the bathroom, we're going to get utilization of the grass that's out there on day three because I I don't have the time to put the addition on the house to make sure they graze in the second living room,
Yeah.
in the kitchen the next day.
Yeah.
And so again, it goes back to personal preference.
Yep.
My thought is if they're grazing in the bathroom, I'm going to stick with this analogy, they're still in the house.
Yeah.
So we're still in a cycle that if we can get, if you're moving every 3 days, just know that you are part of a very small percentage of people that are doing rotational grazing. If
Yep.
you're doing 5 day rotations, great, still part of the minority. If you're continuously grazing, you're part of the majority, and uh, the research and resources are out there to show you the benefit of rotational systems. But those daily moves, one of the one of the things we're going to try to do with our equip funds, and even if we didn't have those funds coming in to setting up, Tom Perkins NRCS grazing model, which is what I think the U.S. government needs to term it as now, because I think it's a beautiful model for rotational grazing. The goal is I can move one piece of fence,
Yep.
and I can move them every day. It's about reducing labor, whereas right now the majority of the rotations we're building are three-sided, four-sided, semi like permanent type fencing allotments, so that labor and time involved is significant.
Yeah.
And part of that is just we don't have the permanent fence infrastructure to go out and move as frequently as what we would like to. But yeah, that I didn't mean to hijack your what I'm assuming was going to be Tom's monologue on moving sheep rapidly. But
Well, I
yeah,
know. So I know in in Richie's case, because I'm assuming because of his work schedule, he can he moves sheep every 6 days. So I'm assuming, this is like every Saturday, Sunday, he's setting up fence and he's moving it. Or whatever his day off is. I'm assuming it's a Saturday, Sunday. And that's definitely better than continuously grazing. It definitely is. Um, I would challenge him to try to figure out a way that you could cut that down to 3 days. So set your fence up for your regular 6 day move, but then put something in to divide that so that they're in one half or 3 days. You could easily open the fence up. They can go through to the other side and graze that for the next 3 days.
yeah, and
And
make sure that
I don't think that would
those,
add a massive amount of labor. Now I know with the way the sunlight hours are now, a lot of people are leaving for work in the dark and they're coming home in the dark. And I'm not a big fan of moving sheep in the dark. But if you can figure out a way to get, somebody there to open that up and let them through to the other side and cut that down to 3 days. But I know the big issue with sheep, and I suppose to be with goats too, any small ruminants, is that parasite cycle. And this time of year, I'm not worried about it a whole lot, but we know those parasites can still be there, and they can still infect sheep. And that's my big thing with moving sheep every day is you're trying to keep them out of that parasite zone. And I think that's every bit as important to consider as the grass is itself.
yeah, and to that point, we can kind of rehash some of that when we think about the life cycle, from the time if those sheep go in with parasites in their system, and we assume that very few flocks are completely clean.
Yep,
Um, we know day one they go in and they're laying feces out that have larvae, have eggs in them. Those eggs develop into larvae, go through those molts, and then end up in the infective L3 stage. And when we're talking parasites, we're going to primarily focus on Haemachus contortus or barber bollworm.
yep,
Um, by day 7, with the right conditions, they're in that infective stage.
yep,
Uh, Even as quickly as sometimes day 5. If it
yep,
is hot and humid and we have moisture, it would not be unlikely wouldn't be shocked to go out and see L3s in some of those fecal paths, some of those fecal piles that are out there in the environment. Those are just new population parasites. Those are not carryover from your
Yep.
past grazing allotment. And so that's the hard thing is these things stack on top of each other. And so you think by day 7, you have them out there. By day 5, it's a possibility. By day 6, you're moving them off. Are you picking up some? If that pasture was clean when you went in, by day 6, we were pretty confident that you could be picking up some of them. The
Yep.
difference is you look at this compounding effect of what's there on day 6 and what's there on day, say, 14. If you're
Yep.
moving every 14 days, every 2 weeks, well, that population, sheep don't stop depositing manure on the environment in the pasture. And so, what was laid on day 2, what was laid on day 3, day 4. Now we have this compounding effect that by day 14, that second week that they're out there, we're very, very confident that the parasite has had enough time to molt into the infective stage, and B, they're probably grazing at a low enough interval, low enough forage height that they are picking up parasites at that
Yep.
stage.
Yep.
And I'd say the same thing with day 6. There's enough short regrowth out there that they're going back to those tender new shoots, picking those up, picking up parasites. Um, that that's a big aspect. And kind of that last question, why we're focused on the immune system and selecting sheep that have some flexibility to work in environments that maybe we want to force them into. Obviously, the best way to avoid it is just to prevent exposure as best you can.
Yep.
So I think the second part of this, and I'm curious to get Tom's take, if we're on that environment and depositing parasites and eggs on that pasture we've discussed, if you can get it down to 3 days, how long do you want to see? What's your like golden number of coming back to that pasture that you just pulled sheep off of? How many days of
That
rest
same
in
paddock.
between?
Yeah,
Yep.
I would say a minimum of 45, just from the parasite part of it.
Yeah.
Just
That's probably not
45.
long. I mean, they're still going to be there. You're going to see some
Right.
death
Right.
loss,
But it
but I think we get
shouldn't be as many, and hopefully
correct.
you got more regrowth, so your sheep are not grazing down into that parasite zone. That 3 or 4 inches
Right.
down um, is about where those parasites are going to be. Anything below 4 inches. So if you could keep yourself from grazing below that, it's from all points of view, the grass's point of view, the parasite's point of view, the sheep point of view, all of that's better if you can, keep from grazing below that. So you
Yeah.
have to have that
And
regrowth to get them back in there. And you're trying to wait out some of those parasites. Some of those parasites are going to die off naturally out there. But if you're coming back at 30 days, you're right in the golden spot.
right, right. And
Parasites.
that's just
And
real
that's the
quickly,
worst
Tom.
you can do.
Tom mentioned something there on that's a really important part of the equation. The When he's coming back in 45 days, 60 days maybe, yes, we expect that parasite to die off to some extent in the environment. But he's also allowing for this deep grass, this quantity of forage to be present so that we're actually diluting the amount of parasites that are being taken up. So the sheep are going and grazing higher up in the canopy. They have forage access that isn't in that bottom 4 inches of that plant.
Yep.
And so, yeah, they may consume some. There might be parasites left from our past movement, but the majority of the forage that they're intaking is higher in the canopy, does not have a parasite located on that blade of grass that high
Yep.
up. So, that's a huge part of it. And again, he's pulling them out that next day. So they go into the next paddock with a tall canopy. And so we're just reducing how many accumulate because of their their consumption of parasites are lower in those environments.
Yep, and we know too that well-fed sheep can do a much better job of fighting off those parasites. Diet has
Yep,
an awful lot
nutrition.
to do with, yep, nutrition has an awful lot to do with that. So I think getting that better forage definitely helps in the long run too. Well, Cam, it's been fun catching up with a few of these questions. We still have more. It's
Yeah, one more episode.
yeah, probably one more we could do some questions and answers. So it's been good catching up with you. But thank you for listening to the Grazing Sheep podcast. There is a Facebook page. There's a YouTube channel. You can reach out to me at bigtomperkins@gmail.com. So, Cam, we'll talk to you next week, and you have a Merry Christmas.
We will do that. Merry Christmas to you
Everybody,
guys.
all our uh, podcast listeners.
Yeah,
Let's,
this should come out like Christmas Eve. Is that
I
right?
think it will, yeah, because I think
So
Christmas is on Wednesday.
do yourself a favor, get the family around there and
Yeah, listen to the
plug
Christmas
in the
story on the Grazing Sheep podcast.
right. There you go. There you
All
go.
right, buddy. We'll talk to you later.
All right, Tom. Bye.
Bye.